Good. Okay. Last week, unfortunately, I had no time for convert to video file and uploading to the YouTube channel, but I will do on the time of October. And if somebody would like to see again, it's real possible. Anyway, in the last occasion, I spoke about most important constitution of environmental history. According to constitution of environmental history, necessary to define evolution of environmental thinking and the basic terms like methods which able to reconstruct the environmental change on the historical time, and secondly, necessary to define the crucial terms of environmental or historical reconstruction, space and time. First, look at the time. This was the last slide in the last week. If we would like to describe the time, the meaning of the time, necessary to focus size measuring, which scale we can try to describe the time. The first one, basically in the historical past, we can point two calendars. A sun calendar, which follow the astronomical trajectory of sun, and the moon calendar, which follow the moon rhythm of the moon. A little bit different, but very similar, both. The second one, after agrarian revolution, introduced and increased the importance of seasons and the vegetation periods, because in the plant farming and animal husbandry follow the rhythm of vegetation. The next one, after appearance of great religion like Islam, like Christendom, like, for example, Taoism in China and Buddhism in lot of part of the Asia, basically the source area, northern part of India, but later proliferated whole of the Asia, used the liturgical hours. And finally, in the Middle Ages, early Middle Ages appeared, not early, high Middle Ages appeared the mechanical clocks. Measuring tools, sundial was the first one, water clocks, which applied Greek scientist scholars, incense burner, candle, and finally appeared the mechanical clocks. If we are looking the discipline, we are looking the science, we can separate two types of measuring and two types of description of historical and the time flow of the time. The first one, linear, irreversible, and cumulative. This is the one unit. And the second one, a cyclical, a cycle time concept. Look at first a linear, irreversible, and cumulative time concept. Look at the element of the definition. Linear concept mean in the past started the trajectory of human history like a highway, and each nation, each folks walking or travel on the same trajectory. Starting hunting gathering, later antiquity and Middle Ages, modern industrial time, and for example, according to vision of Marx, in the future, the communism. This is the same trajectory. It's a 19th century like thinking. Each folks follow the same historical trajectory. Why irreversible? Irreversible means the time, the river of time flow only in one direction. No other, no machinery of time travel back to the past, it's not possible, only one direction. The second one are cumulative. In the 19th century, historians look at the history, the huge quantity of personal deeds. For example, I break this cup. It's one deed. For example, walk out from this lecture room. The second deed. these deeds increasing, like accumulate, like a huge amount of human deeds. And imagine the historian necessary to define each human deeds. This is the mission of historian. But very interesting, at the turn of 19th and 20th century appeared a new concept about the cycle. New concept invented economists. Why? Because in consequence of industrial revolution, became very complicated economical interaction and appear the stock of exchange. You know which is the stock of exchange. This is the place where there is a bill of exchange of different enterprises and banks and for example insurance company and other, and the level of this paper may change day by day or hour by hour. If somebody able to estimate the trajectory of value changes, able to earn huge money. Therefore, a lot of economists try to describe how change the value of this paper and reconstructed a historical event in the past, because in the 19th century a lot of time series, price, salaries, production reconstructed and discovered, for example, this is the trajectory of salary changes. Other one, this is the trajectory of production. Other trajectory of prices. And a wise economist, if able to reconstruct, for example, here, the trajectory of price changes and buy here the paper of insurance company and sell on the top and earn huge money. Therefore, not for scientific ambition, but for earning money, describe a cycle in the historical past. Not by chance, a historian, after economist, became sensible for changes, for the cyclical changes. The first historian, the French school, if possible you remember the name of this French historical school, Annales School. Leader of Annales School, Ernst and Fernand Braudel, describe not only in the modern time, but in the historical past, a cycle. Ernst described a 10 or 20 years long cycle, which good description of the crisis of French Revolution. Before the French Revolution unfolded a huge crisis down, and after the French Revolution turned up. This is the one reason, economic reason, great success of France at the end of 18th century. Much more interesting, Fernand Braudel, who described a secular, a lot of 100 years long cycle in the historical past. Look at the example of the secular cycle. Braudel described the history of global economy. We are living recently in the global economy, but according to hypothesis of Braudel, the starting date of global economy is the 12th century. Braudel described the cycle with help of three information. This is the starting point, turning point, and closing point. This is the cycle, historical cycle, according to Braudel. The starting point of first cycle, when in Europe, the local economy, the continental economy, was able to produce surplus, which the contemporaries were able to change and launch the trade in Europe. The turning point in the middle of 14th century, this is the huge crisis of Black Death if possible, you know, the Black Death. 1/3 of European population is dead. It's the deepest crisis whole of the human history. And the closing point, this is the age of great geographical discoveries. When Europeans discovered the way to America, Asia, India, and almost all of the part of the world. The second cycle started when the first one closed, and the turning point, the middle of the 17th century. Why? Because until the middle of 17th century, the richest area, whole of Europe, was a Mediterranean world. And decline of Mediterranean world with Spain, with Italy, with Ottoman Empire started in the middle of 17th century. And the closing date, the middle of 18th century, the dawn of French Revolution and Industrial Revolution, before, and the dawn period. The third cycle, the same when closed the second one, and the turning point is 1870. Why? Because this is the closing period, a closing period after the Napoleonic Wars, introduction of nationalism. It's very important because before the age of Napoleonic Wars in Europe existed only empires where the language and the common culture wasn't so important. Much more important, religion. Not by chance, early modern time was the time of Reformation and Counter-Reformation. Rivalry among different Christian churches. Introduced nationalism and the age of citizens, a bourgeoisie. Why? Because in the traditional time, the most important class of society was the nobility, and changed the position. In the modern times, the guiding force, the guiding class became the bourgeoisie. Okay, this is the turning point, and the closing date, the middle of the last decade of the 19th century. Why? Because this decade was the last peaceful decade, before the First World War. And the second cycle, the fourth cycle, started when closed the third, and the turning point is the middle of 70s. Why? Because in that time closed the great recovery after the Second World War. And recently, if we are looking the secular cycle, is down. I don't know how long, but recently, if hypothesis of Brodel is true, recently we are living in the downturn of the global cycle. Why so interesting for us, for the contemporaries who are living in some period? Because if somebody living in the deep crisis period, this is the horizon. Like, for example, a ship on the waving ocean. The position defines the normality, the level of normality. Here, on the crisis, the bad level, this is the normal level. Up, it's much better. For example, good example, after the great recovery in the Second World War, each generation lived better than the former generation. But recently it's not true. Some generation, new generation, young generation, living much worse according to income possibilities and salary and living standards than the father and mother's generation. Very interesting. Okay, good. But we can identify three processes which are linear, irreversible, and cumulative. If we are looking at the world population, the trajectory of world population follow the green line. For example, the population of human in Africa around 50,000 years before Christ, 5,000 persons. Why so dangerous? Because 5,000 persons, so tiny population, was on the threshold of dying out, of disappearance, whole of the human species, and somehow survived. On the age of Christian calendar, the starting date of the Christian calendar, the population of human estimate 300,000 or 400,000, no, sorry, 300 million, 300 or 400 million estimated. And the first milliard, or according to American English, billion, reached at the beginning of 19th century. And recently, the human population estimate around 8 billion or milliard, is different British or American English. According to your opinion, its exponential growth will continue or will stop? Because recently, like a blowing up, will close or not? Who vote for continue? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, it's closing down. No opinion. Okay, we'll close. Not for disaster, but for natural processes. No. Natural processes mean, do you know the term of demographical transition? Somebody know this term, demographical transition? Okay, demographical transition mean on the time of modernization, fertility. You know which is the fertility? How many children or child were born in the population, in the global population or local population? Look at how changed, how unfolding the demographical transition. This is the time scale, this is the time, and this is the fertility level. In the traditional society, the fertility level of humans or society changed around 40 per thousand. 40 per thousand mean to 1,000 people were born 40 children. Okay, obvious. And in the modern level, it's changed around 10 per thousand. In the traditional level, the continuous level, this is the fertility, natality. And the scattered level, a mortality. If natality higher, nuptiality or natality higher, increase the population. If the scattered level, mortality higher, decrease the population. But in long term, the traditional population live in a balanced situation. Up, down, up, down. But on the time of Industrial Revolution, started to decrease the mortality. Why? Because improved devices of agrarian activity, one, and other side, improved transporting network in consequence of introduction of railway network. Before the railway network, no crowd trade inside of the continent. Not by chance, the greatest cities founded on the seaside or lakeside, seaside like London, or riverside like Paris, or lakeside like Stockholm in Sweden. Why? Because huge quantity of of products in the traditional time were able to transport only via water transport. Okay. In consequence of proliferation of railway network, improved the food security. Probably you know this term. Food security, able to equalize the regional differences in the harvest. Okay, decrease the mortality, but natality or nuptiality left similar like in the traditional time. Why? Because in peasant society, no social security. The young peasant work in the local household since 8 years old. I remember because I lived a traditional, quasi-traditional society, and I was 8 years long, why introduced to the organization of family household. It's quite a general. And first one, it's a workforce in the peasant society, the children. The second one, this is the social security, because in the old parents, no other chance for survive in old period, only support of children. Therefore, the most important fortune of the poor people, the children, in the traditional society. Therefore, for long term, the fertility left very high, the natality. And later, start to decrease the natality. Why? Because, first one, introduce the mandatory education. Mandatory education. My father told to me that his parents discussed a lot the elementary school teacher. Why? Because on the part of vegetation period, one interest working on the field, other interest necessary to go to school. And which interest, which position was stronger, and working on the household. Therefore, missed so many hours in the elementary school, not able to compensate. Therefore, at the beginning, in the first half of the 20th century, majority of peasant children weren't able to close even elementary school studies. Not for brain and mental problems, not, because necessary to work on the field. But after obligation of elementary school education, no option. And the children became from income position, workforce position, expensive position. It's very expensive to growing up in the family. Therefore, decrease the fertility. Moreover, increase the proportion in the population which lived in the city, and the models and the lifestyle of urban lifestyle basically different, the rural mentality and the rural lifestyle. Decrease the population, mortality stabilized, and finally mortality and fertility stabilized like in the traditional time. This is the process of demographical transition, which we can divide to 4 periods. The first one, a traditional period, very high mortality, very high fertility, mortality and fertility, and the demographical growth, it's minimal or stable. The second phases, natality is same, left in the traditional level, and the mortality decreased. produce a huge demographical output. And the third phase is when mortality is stabilized and decrease the fertility, decrease the natality. It's increase the population, but a generation by generation with smaller rate. And finally, the fourth level is a modern equivalence, the modern balance situation. This is a model. Like each model, able to analyze the real situation. If, for example, we take the real process of Africa recently to the demographical model, we can identify that the economic demographic output of second and the third phases in the case of Africa much smaller. Why? In consequence of proliferation of AIDS, sickness, and the Ebola. Therefore, the model we can use for comparison the real situation, and we can understand the peculiarity of real processes if compared with the model. Okay, but which is the conclusion? After some increased the growth of world population, if modernized each of human population, will stabilize between 12 or 16 million or billion. This is the forecast, demographical forecast to the 21st century. The second one, energy per capita. Energy per capita. If we are looking for example, age of Stone Age, everybody used as energy the muscle, the personal muscle. In the second phase, on the time of agrarian revolution, used the personal muscle and the muscle of domesticated animals, camel, cattle, horses, and so and so. And the simple engine, like for example, water mill and windmills, the simple engine. And in the age of industrial revolution, using fossil fuels and the nuclear energy. I don't know, the green energy will usable and the same proportion, but recently majority of energy produced based on fossil fuel and nuclear fuels. And the last one, information. On the Stone Age, early period of humans, only the oral communication. The basic level of cultural evolution based on personal memories. And the second level, invention of writing and the printing, and recently huge quantity of information flowing on the way of internet. Okay, look at the space. We close the time. Look at the last category, the space. If we are looking at historical guidebook, open, for example, a historical map, at least 3 information we can identify in the historical map. The first one, a distance. How we can identify the distance? For example, on the corner of up or down corner of map, we can identify the scale. How we can transform the real distance from the maps. The second information, a surface, the landscape. Look at, for example, this map about Czechia, Czech Republic. For example, green one, a valley area or basin area, and the gray, it's a hilly area. We can identify with help of colors. And the political structure. Generally, for example, secondary school historical guidebook or historical map, like a patchwork. This is a Germany, different provinces of Germany, Bavaria, Saxony, Hessen, Turin, and Prussia. Basically, if we are reading a historical guidebook or maps, these are the most important, obvious spatial information. If we are looking at geography, because the geography is a real discipline of space, we can identify a lot of category of geography. The first one are geographical space, geographical spheres. The first one, a geographical lithosphere. Lithosphere, this is the rock sphere, the rock surface of the Earth. It's not so large. The size of the lithosphere change between 20 to 120 to 160 kilometers. It's not so large. The second one, a pedosphere. A pedosphere. A pedosphere, it's interesting because it came from the lithosphere, but very interesting and very interesting to memorize. Size of the soil. This is the surface of agrarian activity. Production of food, only half meter. Half meter. And survival of human based on half meter. This is the average, a global average. Some area only 2 centimeter, other side 3 meter, but in global average, half meter only. Why so sensible? Because majority of soil in the modern world took under chemotherapy with pesticides and fertilizers. And without chemotherapy, not able to produce food, not able to produce plants. And very sensible question, because the supporter of organic production arguing that cancelling the fertilizer, cancelling the pesticides, because this is a chemotherapy. It's very dangerous, but very interesting and very important to realize. But recently, number of population 8 million, and without fertilizer, no bread for 2. No bread for 2 million. Therefore, it's very high price, very high price. But if one day to other we close to application of fertilizer, no bread for 2 million people. It's not so, it's quite a so high number. Okay, the next one, hydrosphere, under soil or the ocean and any other, biosphere, atmosphere, and finally anthroposphere. Somebody know what means the anthroposphere? Anthropo, human, sphere. Artificial production, like this building, like asphalted surface, highways, which produced by human. This is the anthroposphere. If looking the huge world recently, the size of anthroposphere, generation by generation increase. This is the anthroposphere. And noosphere, somebody know which is the noosphere? No? Noosphere, this is the intellectual sphere around the Earth. Around the Earth. Like for example, internet. This is the geographical sphere. Geographical sphere. Not only the physical sphere exists around the Earth, but intellectual activities sphere. This is the internet. Okay, look at the ecology. Very interesting the term of ecology, because ecology and the ecological thinking a little bit different any other discipline which founded in the 19th century. Because ecology, the key concept of ecology, ecosystem. Maybe ecosystem, one puddle on the both side, on the pavement, and whole of the universe. Ecosystem theory, in former lecture I spoke about, no hierarchy. Each ecosystem analyzed as identical. But look at the last space concept, a mental space. Do you know which is the mental space? Mental space. The spatial memory in our brain. Look at, for example, this is the geographical map which published in Australia. Here is Australia, here Europe, and here the United States. Why? Because the core area, the central area for Australia is Australia, of course, obviously. And very strange, but the real Mantle Map published one of the first about Paris, capital of France. Somebody visited in France? Paris? You visited how long?
For a week.
For a week.
For 1 week.
1 week, yeah. I suggest to you visiting in Paris because on the modern world there are not so high number of global cities. Paris one global city, but unfortunately necessary to learn French because the French people, I don't know why, it's a huge culture, but it's not only question of generation. According to my experiences, even the young generation, the French young generation, don't want to learn any other languages. Therefore, if you visit in Paris, necessary to speak in French. Fortunately, my first foreign language was French, therefore it's worked. But which is the Mantle Map? Basically, the Mantle Map is the memories about the space. First time described the Mantle Map in the United States, in Chicago. It's northern city in northern part of United States. Two scholars of human geography and anthropology. You know which is the anthropology? Anthropology, it's one 20th century discipline. And you know, very close to the ethnography, but a little bit different. Somebody know which is the differences between ethnography and anthropology? No? Ethnography founded in the 19th century and follow the methodology of the 19th century. Look at, for example, somebody would like to analyze the Indonesian people in Java island. And an ethnographer, Hungarian ethnographer, walking into the library and read each publication about Indonesian people. And after realizing an elaboration of works or studies and articles and books about the Indonesian people, travel to Indonesia and take, for example, a test or interview and so, and picking information, and travel back to Hungary and publish one article or book about Indonesian people. This is the strategy of 19th century sciences. Anthropology, basically different. Anthropologists start without prejudice. Never visiting the library for reading the articles and books about the Indonesian. No, it's a white sheet. And travel to Indonesia and live together for 5 days, 5 years with Indonesian people. Without prejudice. Because this is the 20th century sciences which try to avoid the prejudice about the people. And for example, I worked in the Central European University. It's existed until the last years in Budapest. And one of my colleagues, Michael Stewart, an English guy, studied anthropology in London and decided we'll analyze Hungarian Gypsy society. Without any knowledge of Hungarian language, travel to Hungary, ask information about traditional Gypsy local rural society, and ask which is the most traditional, bought one ticket to Sajó-Babon, it's rural area, far from Budapest, travel to Sajó-Babon, walk into the ghetto of Gypsy community, and move to one building and live together with the local gypsy society with 3 years. First week would like to kill, and later he became the godfather majority of newborn babies. Okay, this is the differences between ethnography, 19th century style of research, and the 20th century. Okay, turn back to the story. In the sorry?
Just one question. So I didn't really understand now the difference between ethnography and anthropology. And is anthropology actually based on
personal experiences?
Yeah, personal experiences, and from a point of
no former
cultural beings.
The subject almost the same. The methods, which are different. The first time it's somehow picking and collecting the former information, and according to anthropologists, no former information.
Okay.
Necessary to experience, picking experience personally, without prejudice. Because if you read, for example, some articles about the gypsy population, this form a prejudice, somehow change the eyeglasses, change the color of eyeglasses. Because if somebody told that these gypsy people are evil or kind, somehow you follow, and this is your former question. And according to anthropologists, it's very dangerous making former questions or prejudices. This is the basic differences. Okay, turn back, because I tell it because a strategy of forming of mental map much close to the the strategy of anthropologists. Okay, a mental map described first time in Chicago by anthropologists and human geographer. How? The first experiment was making a map and visited in factory, and the workers received a white sheet. Everybody received a white sheet that necessary to draw the trajectory from lodging to factory. And the result, very surprising, because the people who traveled for years on the same trajectory from habitation for lodging to factory didn't able memorize the buildings and the details of the traveling routes, traveling trajectory. Only remember the starting place, the arrival place, and the places which were necessary taking decision. For example, turn right, or bus station, or metro station, or crossroads, no any other. Why? Because the brain tries to save itself and memorize only the important places of space. Only some very scattered, no any other. This is the first one. Selection of spatial information. First one. The second one, the brain, the mental map, the map inside of our brain, not only information, a spatial information like a GPS. My favorite is a GPS because 99% able to guiding one place to other. 1% is dangerous, but mainly it's function very well. Turn back, mental map. It's selective. The second one, connect not only intellectual information to the space, but emotional information. For example, in Chicago, identify that distributed photos about different districts of Chicago in elementary school. And for pupil necessary to write emotional information to the pictures. And very interesting overlapping that high Middle Ages pupil wrote to the swimming pool buildings joy and happiness. And to the same picture, the immigrant pupil wrote hate, and the anger, because it's standing on the other side of the fence. The high Middle Ages inside and the underclass outside. And for my personal experiences, during my young adult or student period, this is the age of communism. On the age of communism, was very different travel abroad. Moreover, it's prohibited bringing books one country to other. It's mean smuggling. Therefore, I remember when I approaching, not only in the past, even recently, my stomach up. Because crossing on the border, it was a very dangerous operation. And even though when in the frame of European Union, no real meaning crossing on the border area, my emotional reaction, my stomach up. When, for example, I travel from Austria to Germany, nobody stopped at me because I am inside of the inner part of the European Union. Okay, two important peculiarity of Mantle Map: selectivity and emotional content. Look at one Mantle Map about Paris. A little bit less than 300 Parisian people received a white sheet and had to draw the memories, the spatial memories about it. The winner is a sand river, obviously because it's half cutting the city. 84,300 people, it drew into the white map the trajectory of Seine River. The second one, outskirts of Paris. Why? Because inside of the Paris living only the tourists, because very expensive and the aristocracy. Therefore, the majority of people draw the outskirts of the Paris, the borders of the Paris, in the French term banlieue. Banlieue, this is the outer part, outer district. The third one, Arc de Triomphe, at the end of Champs-Élysées, and which constructed by Bonaparte Napoleon. And the fourth one, Notre Dame. Probably you know that this is the very famous church which was burned down 2 years ago and reconstructed yet. And the fifth one, Tour Eiffel, you know, it's constructed in the end of 19th century in the World Exhibitions. And very interesting, according to first plan, after the World Exhibition should to deconstruct. But so good look and so became so good luck and look and good construction and survive and reconstruct a lot of times. But necessary to know, a Tour Eiffel constructed temporary, according to original plan. And the sixth one, Bois de Boulogne. Bois means forest. Forest of Boulogne. Do you know why draw into the Mantle Map? A forest on the outskirts of city. If you have information, memories about the Bois de Boulogne, no? You can guess. Which activity located in the Bois de Boulogne? This is the core area of prostitution. Prostitution. And very interesting, in the marketing, there is a category of intensity of information. Who are the consumer of prostitution? Middle-class male. Mid-class male. And if we are looking the scale of Mantle Map, approximately 90% of experiment were male. And 49.1% not only knew the place of Bois de Boulogne, but were able to draw the good place onto the map. Therefore, if we are looking at the intensity of information in the perspective of consumer, this is the most intensive. Almost each man knew the place and location of Bois de Boulogne. Okay, close to the Mantle Map, look at the case studies. We are over the definition of environmental history, space, methods, time, scientific background, and so. Look at the case studies. In the case of case studies, necessary to divide according to terms. Fernand Rodin, who was one of the best, or according to some opinion, the best historian of the 20th century, distributed the historical events according to terms. The shorter terms is the short term. Short term, it's a less, from starting to closing of historical event, less than 1 year. For example, this course unfold in the frame of short term, half year, 1 semester. This is the short terms. Historical event which from the starting to the closing point, less than 1 year. The second one, a middle term. It's named by Fernand Rodin, temps de conjoncture. It's longer than 1 year, but less than 10 years. Decade-long period. For example, university studies for you, approximately in the middle term. 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, it depends on the strategy of education. And finally, the long term, a long durée. Like, for example, a trajectory of global economy on the secular cycle. This is the long term. In the first step, look at the interaction between the physical environment and the society in short term. A short term example. Look at the short term. A Mongol invasion. A Mongol invasion is a very interesting story. This is the empire founded by Genghis Khan, a Mongolian empire. A Mongolian empire was the largest empire, whole of the human history. A British empire, only second one, according to surface, a controlled and conquered surface. And history of Mongolian empire divide historian according to military campaign. Military campaign organized against China, eastward, and westward against Russian Principality, Kiev, and Poland and Hungary. The final ambition of Mongolian empire, conquering whole of the world. And Hungarian king, Béla IV, received information about the invasion. Why? Because one Hungarian monk named Julianus traveled to finding a Hungarian old Hungary. It's for forest students, some history about the Hungarians. A Hungarian tribes came from steppe area, and the old Hungary located somehow Ural mountains on the border area between Asia and Europe, and moved a nomadic people and arrived to the Carpathian Basin. And therefore, in the Hungarian tradition, had a myth that some Hungarian left eastward. And for Hungarians, necessary to find the Hungarian tribes which left eastward. And Julianus, a Hungarian Dominican monk, traveled to Volga River area, and according to diary of Julianus, met personally 300 years after the Hungarian arrival to the Carpathian Basin, met with Hungarians, lived in the Volga River, and was able to communicate Hungarian language and receive information about Mongolian invasion. Finally, under direction of Batu Khan, arrived a Mongolian invasion. This is the trajectory of Friar Julian. This is the old Hungary. This is the new Hungary. Here, turn back and receive. This is the Magna Hungaria. Received information about the Tatars. It's named in Eastern Europe. It's named Tatar or Mongolians. Are the same because the Tatars, one tribe of Mongolians, and somehow borrowed for whole of the people. Okay, and after conquering of Russian Principality, Mongolians arrived to Hungary, and the key battle located somewhere here, and the Hungarian army lost this battle. And one of the good news of this battle of Muhi, that the king survived and escaped from the battlefields. Why so important? Because the feudal structure, feudal governmental or state structure, the key person is the king. If the king died, a lot of rivals try to taking under control the throne. Therefore, if death of king, majority of cases start a civil war and somehow the chaotic situation. Therefore, very important that in this tragical situation, the king survived this crisis. And very interesting, Mongolians occupied whole of the country and stopped on the river of Danube. Danube is the second largest river whole of Europe. The first one is the Volga River in Russia, and Danube is the second one. And a Mongolian invasion stopped on the Danube River, not for size of the river, because when the Volga River is crossover without any problem, but in the long process of conquering, it's slowed down the Mongolian troops and reached only in October the level, the line of the Danube. And winter time started quite early. That started to frozen over the river, frozen over. And finally, in January, frozen over the river, and Tatar troops, the Mongolian troops, crossed through the river and burned down the Transdanubian area too. Why interesting for us? Because the Danube River, frozen over, only 2 or 3 times a decade. 2 or 3 times. Therefore, in the following April mean 1242, the great Khan in Mongolia died. Therefore, the following April, whole of the Mongolian army went back to Mongolia. And for Transdanubia had a chance survive the Mongolian invasion without loss. And became tragical for Transdanubian population, this situation for coinciding a Mongolian invasion and very cold winter time. Look at the situation. No cold winter, and the Danube didn't frozen over. No problem. Because this is a cold winter, but not so rare cold winter. Without frozen over, no chance for crossing over on the river and burning down the Trans-Danubian area. This situation became tragical for Trans-Danubian population in the coincidence of two events: Mongolian invasion and the climate anomaly. You notice? Okay, it's everybody a little bit confused. I told it a little bit confused manner, but without cold anomaly, no chance for Mongolian troops crossing over, and because following April turn back to Mongolia, a chance had for Trans-Danubian area survival without any population and any other loss. And if no Mongolian invasion, no tragical consequences of unique winter anomaly. Therefore, the coincidence of both became a tragical factor for Trans-Danubian history. Okay, look at the second example from the French history. In the case of Ernst Lambrus, I told about that before the French Revolution had a deep environmental crisis. If we are looking the series of winter and summer time, 70, 83, very hot summer, 40, 84 and 5 extremely cold winter and droughty summer, 86 fodder failure during springtime, 88 droughty summer, during the winter time, 88, 89, very cold winter. Why is so interesting? Because if we calculate, started the series of bad weather with 70, 83, 70, 83, 70, 84, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 7 long bad weather and bad harvest. Probably you know the biblical 7 thin and 7 thick cattle. Why? Why so important the 7 years long period in the traditional society? Because in the traditional society, able to collect, reserve or stock for 7 years long period. If for 7 years long period, for any reason, because maybe reason of bad harvest are wartime. But in this case, no wartime the reason of bad harvest, but the bad weather. 7 years long period, bad period, a traditional society not able to survive because not able to collect so large quantity of food and the meal stock, which able to somehow finance for survival. Therefore, not by chance, the 7 years long period closed the French Revolution. Okay, the next one, Irish potato famine. Somebody know the Irish potato famines? This is Irish story. Ireland on the time was a colony of England. A colony of England. Not so good relation between Irish people and English people. Ireland on the time was a truncated society. Somebody know which is a truncated society, a colonial society. Truncated society means that in the traditional time we can describe the society like a pyramid. On the top of the pyramid there is a king, the nobility, bourgeoisie, and the majority of the society a peasant. After conquering of Ireland, English and Scottish people truncated the Irish society. How? It's divided two parts. Lower part, a peasant, left Irish and Catholic, spoke some Celtic language, Gaelic language. And the upper part of society, king or queen, English king or queen, and the nobility and the bourgeoisie, English or Scottish and Protestant. Therefore, and spoke English language. Therefore, free border divided peasant and Irish peasant and conquerors, language, identity, and the religion. No connection to each other. And Irish people lived very small estate. You know which is the estate. This is arable land which used in the household. Therefore, Irish people introduced in the 18th century a potatoes. A potato carrying capacity, you know which is the carrying, how many people are able to live on this basis. Carrying capacity of potato 6-fold higher compared with the wheat or rye or any other cereals. But potato came from America. And in consequence of geographical discoveries, moved not only peoples and ideas, but the sickness too. And in 1845 appeared a new fungi. You know which is the fungi? Fungi sickness, fungi. In consequence of fungi sickness, the potato rotten. Appeared from America. It's quite a general story. For example, my parents told to me that the Colorado bugs, you know which is the Colorado bugs. This is the bugs, insect of potato. Somebody know which is the Colorado bugs? Okay. My parents told to me that in the period between First and the Second World War, in Hungary, no Colorado bugs, only after the Second World War appeared with the transported in the frame of Marshall program, one huge quantity of transport of huge quantity of potato, which infected the Colorado bugs, proliferated everywhere in Europe. Same story, but not bug, but not insect, but a fungi. Fungi infection. Yeah, because there's a bacterial infection, virus infection, and fungi infection. This is the first one. Fungi infection. And appear 45, but which is the ideal for proliferation of fungi? Wet and hot, warm summertime. You know which is the triggering effect? You know the shotgun. And the trigger of the shotgun, it's you pushing and start a chain of interaction. You are not able to close. If after the pushing, this is the triggering effect. And the triggering effect that the following year, after the appearance of this fungi infection, the following summer was hot and wet. And for fungi, ideal, proliferated everywhere in Europe. Everywhere in Europe, majority of potato harvest cancelled totally. In the continent, no problem. because cereal harvest much better and compensate. But in Ireland, in consequence of truncated society, no solidarity between different classes, social classes, launched potato famines and a lot of epidemics. In consequence of huge crisis, population of Ireland for 5 or 6 years decreased to 8.4 million, less than 6 million. 1 million people died. 1 million people died. And the last 1.5 million emigrated. Do you know which area emigrated the Irish people? For example, United States. On the East Coast, Irish emigration located and moved on that time. Emigrated to Australia, never to England because very bad relation, but very interesting story, emigrated to Scotland. Not only emigrated to Scotland, a lot of Irish people, but founded a football club. A football club. Which football club emigrated the Irish immigrants? Somebody know the football? Nobody? Celtic Rangers. Which is the color of Celtic Rangers? Green, white. This is the typical Irish colors. Green, white. But very interesting, not only in Scotland, but a lot of other countries, somehow the minority would like to show themselves in the sport. The football, it's ideal place. Look at, for example, Spain. There is a Spanish student. Okay. Look at, for example, Atletico Bilbao. This is the most important football club of Basque minorities. And for example, it's possible not true, but somehow I read that there is an inner ruling inside of the Atletico Bilbao, no Spanish player.
No.
No, only foreigners?
No, only Spanish people. Only Basque people is able to play in the team.
Yeah, or other one, Barcelona. Barcelona. This is the army of Catalonia, because yeah, Johan Cruyff defined that Barcelona, FC Barcelona, not a football club. This is the army, one army, and this is the same situation in the case of Hungary. There are Hungarian students. Do you know which football club won the most? Who are the winner of? Who won the most championship if the first league, the Hungarian first football league? Which football club won the most championship? Ferencváros. Which is the national identity of Ferencváros? One district of Budapest, Ferencváros, a German minority. Not by chance named this district of Budapest Franzstadt. This was the Franzstadt. It's a German people lived in this district. And the German bourgeois, middle or low bourgeoisie founded the Ferencváros. Which football club is the second one? MTK. Who founded the MTK? A Jewish people. And very interesting, in the Hungarian championship, this is the rivalry of Jews and the German minorities. Very interesting. But the same, like for example in the case of Spain, rivalry between the Basque, Catalonian and for example, imperial Spanish football club like Real Madrid, or for example in the case of Scotland, Celtic Rangers, the club of immigrants, and the Glasgow Rangers is a real Protestant Scottish people. Very interesting. Okay. Anyway, the last example, Second World War. This story I picked with one Hungarian scholar, Neumann János, who emigrated to Denmark, Yehuda Neumann, a metallurgist. He was a metallurgist, but quite a typical natural scholar. After closing of his career, turned toward a historical problem. He was a metallurgist and climatologist, and after he became a pensioner, turned toward the historical problems. And for example, analyzing of historical documentary sources, if looking at a professional natural scientist, the conclusion are a little bit different. And he analyzed age of invasion according to Plan Barbarossa against Soviet Union. This was the Eastern Front history. And he analyzed casualties and the military operation between 1941 and October of 1941 and May of 1942. This is the age of period of military operation of Barbarossa plan. According to military analysis, it was a good plan and had a chance for perform whole of the goals of the plan. The goals of the plan was occupation of eastern part of Soviet Union until the Ural Mountain and until the Caucasus. It's a mountain Caucasus between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. And look at the story. Started the invasion very quickly, and on the time of fall time, slowed down. Why? Because started the raining period. In Russia, in Soviet Union, no routes, no highways. Therefore, the army, the German army, which very mobile and very highly, how the name it's based on the mobile teams. It's tanks and trunks and the strategy based on the quick operation. On the rainy period, on the mud area, mud landscape, wasn't able to move. Why? Because if somebody knows the Russian history, in the Russian history, only 2 seasons had for operation. Summertime, when it's dried out the surface, the landscape, and easy to move, to transport, to travel. And the winter time, when the great river frozen over and transformed the highways of transport and traveling, and snow cover with the skate able to use. Therefore, in Russia, 2 periods of operation. Winter time, summer time. During spring and fall time, no operation, because so rainy that not able to move one place to other. Therefore, Barbarossa plane operation, it stopped in the fall time in consequence of rainy weather. But our German troops and German generals waited some winter time. But the winter was the 4th coldest winter of St. Petersburg. Very, very cold. Very, very cold. The average of winter minus 70 Celsius degree. For comparison, in Hungary, the average temperature of winter time plus 0.5. It's coldest one, which average, because sometimes it's minus 50, some warmer time minus 5. This is average only. Therefore, look at the loss of German army. 140,000 40,000 died in the battle, 40,000 disappeared, no information, and 115,000 starved with cold. Therefore, the general winter killed same proportion from the German troops. And very interesting consequence of this winter general's operation, that something happened in 7th December. 7th December, what happened? Pearl Harbor. You know Pearl Harbor. The Japanese army, it's assault against the Pearl Harbor basis of US Marine. Why so important? Because China, in that time, under Japanese control. And the Russian and the Soviet general, it's afraid for double front operation. And after invasion against Pearl Harbor, clarified that the Siberian army, it can move to Eastern European area, and the Siberian troops won the Battle of Stalingrad, which was a turning point, whole of the Second World War. Therefore, if we are looking this critical situation, a German invasion, a climate anomaly, turn other direction the moving of the history.